What a contrast. A state-of-the-art research station in a palm house? Does the lady belong to the equipment or to the jungle?
Good morning, madam. My name is Jonathan Hunt. I think Vero has...
Yes. Good morning, Mr. Hunt. Dr. Zoldmally. Emma to my parrots only.
I'd like to ask a few questions about Balaj.
Yes, I've heard. I must admit I don't understand the situation, but I'm glad to help if I can.
Madam, when did you last see Balaj?
Let me think. Last week, maybe on Wednesday, he helped me relocate the pandanus. It's hazardous.
Ah, is it a corrosive compound?
No, it's the screw palm. The leaves can cut your hand.
What do you think of Balaj?
He's very young, tends to overdo things, but he absorbs information like a sea sponge.
Did you see a lot of him?
I think he didn't like me at first, or my parrots, but he was excited about age determination, so we became friends soon.
So he was eager about the past?
Especially about radiocarbon dating, which we do here. Nature tells us about the past, or even about artifacts of unknown origin.
Well, I'm personally interested in this too.
As you should be. I know you wrote a book on antique trade. I'm going to read it.
Oh, that's kind. What do you think of Vero?
Vera? She's a typical woman of our age. I wouldn't recommend her to you as a wife.
Well, it hasn't come to my mind.
Very well. In brief, as a person, she apparently performs better than as a professional. But she hasn't been here for long, so there's not much I can help you with.
On the contrary, you've helped a lot. Given my original profession, I have some understanding about radiocarbon dating, but I'd be grateful if you could explain how it works exactly.
I'll try to keep it simple. In nature, carbon mostly exists as carbon-12, but there's also carbon-14, a carbon isotope which is constantly created in the upper stratosphere as a result of cosmic rays. It builds in living organisms, like plants and animals. But carbon-14 atoms are radioactive, and as such, they decay over time. Their half-life is about 6,000 years. This means the quantity of these atoms falls by half in every 6,000 years. When a living being dies, it stops acquiring carbon-14, but the decay continues, and the proportion of carbon-14 decreases. If we measure this proportion accurately in case of an archaeological find, we can tell its age.
And are there no limits? Can you determine the age of any object?
Not quite. We can go back up to about 40,000 years. Our results are most accurate when the object is a few thousand years old. And don't forget, we are talking about things that once used to be living organisms.
I see. So, no dinosaurs. They lived millions of years ago.
Correct. Your knowledge is still a bit superficial, Mr. Hunt. But you're improving.
This lab is so pleasant. Are all these plants and animals part of your research?
My plants and animals keep me alive in this well-equipped, state-of-the-art lab. My motto is back to nature.
Are you a naturist?
By no means. No need to go back to the tree to make your environment more livable. I no longer dive, but still love hiking and sailing with friends.
Poor souls. I wonder how much they understand of what's going on around them. Extraordinary place, like in a Cold War spy movie. I would expect to hear the news from August 1965. A frail figure and a nice face. She's far from the physicist stereotype.
Good morning, madam. My name is Hunt.
Jonathan Hunt? My name is Dr. Tomoro Shafran, but please, call me Tomoro. Just not Tommy, okay?
With pleasure.
I knew you were coming here. Saw you arriving. Vero has good taste.
What? Oh no, I just came about a water sample.
I know. And now it's about Volage. Please, feel free to ask me anything.
I'd like to know when you last met Vero's brother.
On Sunday.
Yesterday. Where?
We didn't actually meet. I just saw him downtown. I guess he didn't notice me.
When was this?
Late afternoon. But he didn't disappear yesterday, did he?
No, not yesterday. What do you think of Volage?
Well, I think he's not the type who just runs off suddenly. It must be some joke, I guess. Vero gets you to do the job, then he'll turn up and laugh at the hassle.
I admit it has occurred to me too.
Well, Volage is a bit strange. Yet, I tend to say I like him. Better than most of the guys of his age.
Did you see him often?
Not really. Sometimes he comes to ask questions.
What kind of questions? About the Vander or Vander?
The Van de Graaff accelerator? No. He usually asks me about language problems.
Asks you about language problems?
Because I speak many languages. That is, I can understand many languages, but hardly speak any of them.
Wow, that's interesting. How come you know so many languages?
When I was a child, my only entertainment was reading books and learning. I was fascinated by the variety of languages. I wanted to understand all the books my parents had. Even today, this is a passion of mine.
What a story. And how many languages are you familiar with?
Well, I can read and write in about 15 to 20 languages. Many of the Western languages, and some dead languages too, like Latin or ancient Greek. Then some Hindi, Mandarin, Hebrew, Arabic, Swahili, Japanese, and Korean. But I learned them merely from books.
Amazing.
Currently, I'm trying to improve my Russian, which I didn't learn in school, unlike many people here.
Incredible. You must be a living dictionary. What do you think about Vero?
She's cool. Men notice her. And she's smart. Born in a family where life is about natural science.
Do you two speak often?
Yes, every day. We usually have coffee together, gossip a bit, but nothing too serious, of course.
I can imagine. I know nothing about the place you call the microprobe. What do you do here?
In fact, we work with two instruments connected to each other. What you can see here is the Van de Graaff particle accelerator, which speeds up particles, such as protons. Then these particle beams are directed onto the target we want to examine. The particles in the beam and those of the target collide, and some of them scatter. We can detect these particles and capture data, which helps determine the composition of the target object.
And the other one?
The second instrument is the microprobe. It can focus the proton beam to a tiny area. This allows us to examine the composition of the target object on micrometer scale.
This means if you put an object in there, you can scan it, just like an X-ray.
Not exactly. It only lets you capture information about the surface, or just below the surface. But it is a perfect method for studying the composition of archaeological findings, for example.
This control room is rather a strange place.
You mean not as frilly as the other labs? I think it suits my personality.
It does, doesn't it?
Oh, you think this craziness is all about decoration? It isn't, I tell you. Come back if you feel bored, or if you need a translator.
Thank you. I will.
Wow. I wouldn't be surprised to meet Captain Spock here. A bizarre structure. And that rabbit over there. An ageless guy. Or do his glasses make this impression?
Hi, I'm looking for Dr. Imire Biberosh.
Jonathan Hunt? Hi. Welcome aboard.
I'd like to ask a few questions. I guess you know what happened.
I know. And my processors don't comprehend. Balash is not like that, but go ahead, ask away.
Have you seen Balaj lately?
No, not for some time. I'm glad he returned my DVDs before the Star Trek feature films. Not that I don't have more copies of them in a box set.
Did he watch them?
No. Actually, it was me who insisted on it. But wait a minute.
What's the matter?
Actually, I saw the guy on Friday through the window, chatting with a mysterious old man.
Mysterious?
At least I've never seen him before. He had a hat on, so I couldn't see his face.
An old man with a hat on Friday.
Balash seems to know the fellow. Must have been over 70, and he talks somehow secretively. I didn't hear a word, though.
Thanks for telling me this. Do you know Balaj Gal well?
Not too well. At the beginning, early summer, he was rather clumsy. Then his girlfriend came along. They kept asking lots of questions, sometimes too many. She left a month ago.
Didn't he ask unusual questions?
He did. He'd been interested in the achievements of 18th, 19th century Hungarian physics.
Strange, asking you about this. I've thought you're a man of the space age.
Oh, maybe you don't know. I graduated as a historian, specialized in the modern era. But later I switched to nuclear physics, and now I control the cyclotron spaceship in the Otomi galaxy.
Extraordinary. So, what strange question did he ask?
I told him about great people like Istvan Hatvani, who was a doctor, teacher, priest, and physicist. A polyhistor, as we call it. He was a resident here at the Debrecen. I suggested Balash to look it up in the library of the Reformed College.
Most interesting. Thanks for the info. I guess you have some impression of Vero.
Oh, yes. I was crazy about her.
Really? Does she know?
No, and please don't tell her or I set the Klingons on you. By the time I figured out how to approach her, my feelings were gone.
Gone.
But still, that girl is very special to me.
Can you tell me about this cyclotron?
With pleasure. No military secrets, of course.
Military secrets?
One never knows. But I like the look of you. You seem very trustworthy. The cyclotron is a particle accelerator instrument. This here is the control system. We accelerate the particles and they gain energy by this. The particles must be charged positive ions. They're created from hydrogen or helium in the cyclotron's ion source. We separate the electrons from the nucleus. What remains is in fact a proton, which can be used for acceleration. Do you follow?
I'm still a bit confused about the acceleration.
Okay. Imagine a round metal cookie can. Suppose you cut it in halves and pull them aside a bit, leaving a narrow gap between the two D-shaped parts. Think about it as a model. Now, when the proton passes through the gap, its speed increases. Inside the can, the path of the particle bends and continues in circles of increasing radius, eventually moving on a spiral path from the inside outwards. Then it is directed into the target object, and bang!
Can you see or hear it?
No, and of course you cannot enter while the engines are running.
And what's that Stargate over there? Is that a bunny to be teleported?
Are you kidding? That's a very smart detector. The positron emission tomography? The PET? Its nickname is PET. PET. We use it to examine small pets after treating them with a bit of radioactive sugar.
I'm overwhelmed.
I'd love to show it to you in action. You should see the nuclear jet start.
Although you're a historian, this place is packed with high-tech equipment.
Well, somehow my devotion for history faded over time. Instead, I began to develop an interest for the present and the future. After a few years, I took a new course in natural sciences. In short, this is how I landed on board of this spaceship here as Dr. Biberosh.
Hi, it's me, Vero.
Hi. I know. I've just finished with the labs. Nothing too helpful.
There's still a chance. I spoke to Peter, you know, the director. He's waiting.
For what?
For you. He wants to meet you.
Well, why not? Should I question him too?
Maybe you can get something useful out of him.
Shall we go right now?
You go alone. I've already told him a lot about you.
Aren't you going to introduce me? Anyway, let's do it this way. I guess I'll find his office.
It's in the main building, first floor on the right.
Thanks.
One more thing. Now I remember what Bolage said that afternoon. He said this: I'm going to meet that teacher woman I talked to yesterday. And then he said he was going to the Reformed College. What do you think?
Could be a lead.
Except we don't know who she is.
But we do. Listen, you said he talked with a middle-aged woman. That could be her.
You may be right. But still, I haven't got the slightest idea who she was.
That may be so, but someone was there at the party who might know. I'm just going to visit him. Bye for now.
Bye.
Here's the deck of the Otomi Ship. I wonder what the captain's like. The all-seeing eye of Professor Shandor Soloy. Pictures from the history of Otomi. A holographic trinket with particles. Lovely.
Good morning. Jonathan Hunt.
Ah, Mr. Hunt. Peter Liotsky. How do you do?
How do you do? It was beyond my hopes to be able to see a nuclear research institute on the inside. I'm delighted to be here.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. In this case, just call me Peter. I'm the older, if you don't mind.
I'm honored. Nice to meet you, Peter.
Take a seat, please.
Immaculate three-piece business suit, but no necktie. Interesting.
Is it true your mother tongue is Hungarian?
Basically, yes. My mother was Hungarian, and she spoke to me in her language. My father was American, but he died early, so I learned to speak English from my grandfather. He was the son of a famous globetrotter and explorer, Samuel Hunt.
What an exciting ancestry. A mixture of cultures. Vera told me you wished to settle down in the country, and this is why you wanted to see her.
Yes, I'm considering buying land in Eger.
I know. And I've been informed about the result of the water analysis. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but your sample is far from mineral water quality.
Thank you. No need to be sorry. I had no intention of going into the mineral water business. It's even better, as the owner should lower the price now.
I see. Glad to hear this.
You might have heard that Bolage disappeared.
Oh, yes. Vera, the poor little one, has just come to me crying. I was going to mobilize my contacts immediately. I have a fairly wide network of connections, you know. But she told me she'd already asked you to be on the case.
Oh, well, no problem. I'd be pleased to free Vera of her commitment. Probably connections could work better in this case than a do-it-yourself detective, such as an investigative journalist from the New York Times.
You work for the New York Times? Why, there's no reason to back out of the arrangement. Vera told me you're very efficient. Please go ahead. I hereby approve the assignment. You are free to go anywhere on Otomki's premises and ask questions to anyone. Just keep it short, please. You understand.
Not quite, but there should be no complaints. Thank you for the opportunity. And once you've allowed me, would you please answer a few questions yourself?
But of course, at your service.
You know Balazs, I assume. What do you think of him?
Well, I think the boy doesn't respect his sister the way he should. Yet she's done everything for him while their parents are absent. I believe he's hiding because of feeling guilty of ungratefulness. What do you think?
I think there's no question about your scientific and management achievements, but your approach lacks some empathy.
You think so?
Yes, but this is not a problem in your position. And of course, I didn't mean to be offensive.
No, I understand what you say. And coming back to this investigation of ours, I did see Balazs Sunday afternoon.
Oh my. And where was this?
It was about 5:20 when we passed by each other downtown. He was just coming from the college.
Did you speak?
I said hello, but he didn't seem to take notice. Looked quite preoccupied and just walked on.
In that case, I should extend the investigation to places outside Otomki as well. Peter, a colleague of yours saw Balazs on Friday in Otomki talking to an old man in the courtyard. It was near the pond where the turtles live. The man was wearing a hat and he had a walking stick. Do you have an idea who he might be?
I think so. The description fits old Karol Voniec, our retired caretaker. He was the jack of all trades at the time of Shandor Soloi. He comes here now and then, eats in the cafeteria, sits in the garden, chats with people.
So he might have told Balazs a few old stories?
He might have, yes. The old chap is absolutely harmless, but I can give you his address. Talk to him.
Yes, please. I'll call on him.
Here you are. It's not far from Otomki.
I'll find it. Thank you. Vero mentioned something that could be important.
How interesting. I wonder why she hasn't told me.
At that party on Saturday, Balazs was seen chatting with a middle-aged lady, likely to be a teacher. She stayed late too. Do you remember who she was?
I only saw that Vera had to warn him about his behavior several times. But I hardly remember who he talked to.
Let's try this way. Was there a woman at the party who happens to be a teacher?
Well, this might be easier. Mind you, it isn't a common thing nowadays to invite white-collar people of lower position. Ah, but I've got it. It must have been Mrs. Pulfy, the widow of the late Professor Geza Pulfy. Her husband was a highly respected scholar, of the old-fashioned type. Headed a university department, very reputable person, although never strived for positions.
Yes, there are people like this.
His widow is a teacher indeed. Out of respect for Geza, his former friends and colleagues keep in touch with her. They say she's not too well off, but too shy to ask for help.
Does she teach in the Reformed College?
No. As far as I know, she teaches history in a grammar school.
Then what was she doing at the college on Sunday, where she met Balazs?
Then what did the lady do in the college on Sunday where Balazs met her, if it was her at all?
I've seen a few of your labs, and I have to admit, I'm amazed. All of them are furnished with a personal touch. I've heard this was your innovation. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. It's a long story, you know. A foreign delegation visited us one day, and their wives came with them. After the official program, we had an informal dinner where some of our researchers were also present.
I guess you chose them carefully.
Naturally. They told good stories. Everyone had an excellent time. The wives were especially delighted because they thought about these guys as some machine parts in lab coats. And suddenly, I realized we'd been hiding something that ought to be shown. So the next day I told my staff that I'd allow everyone to do their work in a home-like environment, as long as the job is done. Strictly subject to individual approval, of course.
This was received well, I guess.
No, they thought me crazy. It took some time for them to understand, but now the results speak for themselves.
I say hats off. A brave and enlightened solution. Mr. Vince, do you know Karoi Vonyets?
The old fella? Of course I do. He did this job before me. Knew Professor Saleh, who founded the whole thing here. Yeah, that was one great man. Karoi surely adored him.
And what does he do now? What is he like?
Yeah, he's very old. Oh, really very old. But a nice fella. Yeah, sometimes he comes here, sits around and chats with people, you know. He likes to tell stories. But we usually don't let him, because he keeps repeating everything over and over again.
How did he get on with Balazs?
Had no idea they knew each other, but if you say so.